Hey, welcome back to the pod. It's the Week 7 recap, Week 8 preview. As always, as I said, we'll recap the games that we previewed from last week, give some winners and losers, some bets that we won and lost, and then preview 4 games. Got 4 ranked versus ranked opponents. As we said last week, it's nice because we're starting to get into, I think, like some playoff elimination games and stuff like that. And then if we have any bets that we've already made or any leans, it's Monday night this week when we're making the pod. So I think you and I were actually the only ones that had like official bets actually on the docket so far. I didn't see if the other guys did, but
Right.
we can get into those possibly later. So let's get right into the recap from last week. We previewed Georgia at LSU, Washington at Oregon, and then Wisconsin at Michigan. So we'll get into the Georgia LSU game, and I think it went not the way that most people thought it would go. I think there were certainly a lot of people that felt like LSU could cover that number. When we previewed it as a pod, I think you and Tolman and I felt like we were leaning Georgia. No official bet. Addison leaned LSU and actually took LSU. He had a good betting week, and so he was on with that game. But to give you guys a brief little recap of the game, and then I'll let Steele get into his thoughts. LSU averaged almost a yard more per play. They had 150 more total yards. They were +4 in the turnover margin. That was a big deal. To me, it seemed like they just brought the physical brand of football that Georgia just doesn't quite have this year, in my opinion. What do you think of that game? Is that what you kind of took away from it?
Yeah, so I originally thought it was possibly going to be on Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
After digging into those numbers a little bit further, Georgia's a road favorite. Just didn't think it was a good enough spot to take them with the points or lay the points. So I actually indeed laid it on the under and was burned late by Joe Burrow's running ability, which I didn't know he had.
Yeah.
But
deceptive athlete.
Yeah, very, very impressed with LSU's performance. Dominant in the trenches, capitalized on the turnovers, like you said. I mean, pretty hard to lose a game when you're +4 in the turnover category.
For sure.
With each turnover roughly accounting for about 5 points per game, according to most data and formulas. So, I mean, that's like a 20-point swing there.
Yeah.
With that turnout. So super impressed with LSU. By no means is Georgia eliminated, with only having 1 loss and still having what they have in front of them.
Sure.
LSU back in the mix. I think you'll probably see them, barring any craziness, probably about 5th in most people's polls or the playoff committee. I'm not even sure when their first rankings come out.
I think it's it might not be
like 2 more weeks.
It might be 2 more weekends. I think it's definitely in October.
Right. So sure. they're still in the mix as well. But I'll be curious to see if Georgia does anything with the quarterback. I know a lot of people were calling for Fields to get some time and just how good he is compared to Fromm and how good Fromm was last year for them.
Right.
How long you stick with that, kind of offense and quarterback and whatnot. But a lot to be determined for both of those teams going forward still.
Yeah, I think that was the last point I was going to make is Georgia has a little bit of a dilemma at quarterback now. And it's similar to – I think it's a little bit similar to Clemson's dilemma earlier in the year. You have a kid that's behind the returning starter that you feel like is more talented. Fields came in – very highly touted, just like Trevor Lawrence, like both like all-world quarterback types of players. Fields, I believe, brings a little bit more with his legs and also has that arm talent. So, Fromm was playing pretty well this year, and he's accurate. He didn't seem to make mistakes, but the one thing that I was wondering about Georgia, and we had talked about this amongst our group and on the pod a little bit, is that we were wondering what would happen if Georgia played a team that was going to basically punch them in the mouth, and that's what LSU did. So it will be interesting to see, as Steele said, what Georgia does moving forward. I mean, Kirby Smart said it in the press conference after the game that they still have everything. All their goals are still intact. They still could win out and get to the playoff and play for another title, but they right now to me don't look quite the same. They look a little soft on the line. Their defense is a little bit too much bend, don't break, in my opinion. But certainly we'll see with them moving forward. And we're actually going to preview LSU again this week, so we're going to get to talk about them a little bit later in the pod here. But for now, let's move on to the next game that we previewed. That was Washington at Oregon. We said it was going to be a pretty big game in the Pac-12 North, and a game that certainly could decide who comes out of that division. A couple little stats for you guys here, and it's interesting because I was able to watch some of this game, but this didn't feel like the game didn't go how the stats would, I don't know, I guess are indicated here. Washington had 6.2 yards per play. Oregon only had 4.68. Washington only had 60 more total yards, but when I looked at like Bill C, like the post-game win expectation or whatever, like Washington was around 63%. So when I kind of dug into the metrics and looked at this game again, it felt like Washington actually outplayed Oregon a little bit. But again, just like in the Auburn game, where people felt the same way about Washington in that game, they failed to close the deal. What did you think about this game? Did you get a chance to dig into it?
I actually did watch some of it.
I think we got to watch. We were together. We got to see some of it when it was going on. But
I think we kind of predicted it pretty well. Where Oregon off a bye at home, getting 3.5 points was the side to play there, and they obviously got the cover in, the win straight up. If you were wise enough to go with that side,
right.
Essentially a playoff elimination game, and I don't see any which way Washington is in the playoff now, unless absolute chaos happens.
It'd have to be just massive chaos.
But they're out. Oregon's still alive for all intents and purposes going forward. Another big game for them this week. Essentially another elimination game for them to see if they step up. But
certainly.
We pretty much predicted it. Herbert looked pretty good. I was actually pretty impressed with Washington's offense that I've been kind of dogging for quite some time.
Sure.
To go in a hostile environment and put up that many points is pretty impressive just in general. I don't think we're that impressed with Oregon's defense, but kind of what we expected as a pace of play as well as outcome.
Yeah.
But going forward, I think Oregon has more to look forward to. Obviously, coming out of there with the win.
Yeah, and we're going to actually preview Oregon again this week. So we got a couple teams back to back that we're going to preview. Yeah, I mean, this game went pretty much as Steele said, how we thought it was going to go. I felt like it was going to be tight. I liked Oregon at home getting the points. Maybe the guys on the pod that took Oregon, maybe we got a little lucky. Washington, it looks like Washington outplayed Oregon, but you're on the right side. You're on the right side. So we'll move on to the last game that we previewed from last week, Wisconsin at Michigan. And this was kind of an interesting game as far as, I've told you guys before that you guys have seen the pod. When we do the pod, especially on Sunday nights, but if we do it on Sunday or Monday nights, we kind of, have to kind of give these quick judgment calls on these games. And I've said before that this is why you should check back under the in the pod description for our picks later in the week, because we might have some change of thoughts. It doesn't happen too often. I think we usually have a good read on the game, but our pod overall liked kind of Wisconsin first glance with what the number was. I think it was around 7.5 or 8, and it fluctuated between like 9.5 to 8, I believe. But we felt like with style of play, with the history of this game, the fact that we haven't seen Michigan really play anybody really for real since Notre Dame. Now, it's subjective whether Wisconsin's for real, and I think we learned a little bit more. But I remember talking to Brian J. from Columbus and Addison, like in the middle of the week, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, saying that I'd flipped my mind on this game, and I actually almost ended up betting Michigan, but I was a little worried about Harbaugh not showing up in like a bigger game, which has been the case recently, and we're going to get into that later in the pod when we're going to be previewing Michigan State. But I felt like the metrics really like Michigan. I was really concerned about Wisconsin's lack of defense and their lack of quarterback play, and that showed up in this game. Your takeaway from this game, do you feel, is it more that Michigan is that much improved, or is it a combination of that and Wisconsin's not as good as everyone thought, or is it just that Wisconsin maybe is just not that good this year?
Yeah, so another playoff elimination game.
Yeah.
More, so to speak.
I would say so, yeah.
Wisconsin out. Even if they somehow rally and win the Big Ten, I don't see them making it either. I think it's more of the same old Wisconsin, where Hornibrook in like pressure situations against elite competition, or at least higher end competition, just fails to show out. I think he started the game like 3 for 3 and then just like fell off a cliff.
He had like
or whatever
25 yards maybe total, or from that point on, like it's embarrassing.
So obviously, if you know the run is coming, even with how good Michigan's D line and D in general is, Wisconsin's highly touted, line across the board could not, make any holes or anything for that rushing attack. Then once you get behind the 8 ball, you get a couple scores down or whatever, you just kind of start to panic, or you start to try to force some things.
Yeah.
And then you kind of saw the wheels fall off for Wisconsin in the second half. I think both good teams. I think Michigan's kind of fixed and righted the ship, so to speak, for the rest of their season. I still think they've got a lot to play for, playoff even. To be considered there with who they have left to play. And once again, we'll preview them this week. With their game against Sparty. So he's open. Go, baby.
He's open. Can we tackle him? Yeah, so we told you guys that we're doing the pod on Monday nights. We made it a rule that we're going to bet the Monday night game. So I took the Niners +9 with like no research or knowledge of the game. But those are good points. I think. So yards per play, Michigan was 6.4. Wisconsin was actually at 5.8. But when I remember thinking to myself, like, there's no way that they were ripping off like chunk plays, and I realized that Addison and I were making fun of them for this. They're so bad at passing that Michigan was allowing them to run it in the end when they were down by so much that it didn't matter to kind of grind the clock themselves.
Right.
So I think Wisconsin's stats are a little skewed, but I mean, Michigan had a 160-yard edge. They made Hornibrook completely non-existent in this game, as Steele alluded to. I agree that I think Michigan, their offense seems to be more efficient. The O-line looked better. Now, again, Wisconsin's D is not good this year. And Michigan State, the game that we're about to preview, has the #1 rush D in the country according to the metrics. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think right now, I wasn't kidding when I told Addison this. Like, I think Michigan's the best team in the Big Ten right now, and I think they're going to have to prove it. Harbaugh's going to have to show that he can beat teams like Michigan State and Ohio State coming up. But certainly a team to be reckoned with coming up. And I think Wisconsin is, as Steele said, they're definitely out of the playoff. I actually don't even think they're going to win the West. I picked Iowa earlier in the year. I'm sticking to that. I like how Iowa's playing right now. But those were the games from last week. Before we get into the Week 8 preview, let's take a little bit of a break. We'll get into the winners and losers for Week 7. Did you have a winner and loser ready, or do you want me to go first?
Go first.
All right, so winner, I'm going to go actually with Michigan State. And the funny thing about this is that I think there were a lot of candidates for winner and loser this week. And the main reason I'm picking Sparty is that I believe they were my loser for the week before. I don't actually think Michigan State played that well against Penn State. I actually feel like they should have lost that game most of the time. But for them to go in there to pull out the win, when a lot of people were, I think, kind of giving them shit and down on them all year, myself included, I might still be down on them. I felt like it was a typical, just out of nowhere, Michigan State pulls off a win against a top 10 team as a pretty big dog. So kudos to them, even if I feel like they got outplayed. All that matters is you get the W at the end of the 60-minute mark. So my loser for the week is going to be Miami. They lost to Carruthers, and this was a team that I said in the beginning of the year that I felt like was going to lose 2 to 3 ACC games. I felt like they were the most overrated team coming into the year when we talked about them in the ACC preview. And it seems like Mark Richt has, if you guys, if we think that Georgia has a dilemma at quarterback, at least they have 2 guys that are pretty good. Miami just has, they got a serious problem at quarterback right now. And I think just overall offensively, they just aren't what they need to be a legit ACC contender. But that's just a bad loss. You just can't lose to Virginia when you have these ACC and these playoff aspirations. So they're definitely my loser for the week. I can give Tolman's if you're not quite ready, or if you're ready.
No, I'm ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Ready. So I got 2 losers. One is it's probably not a cheap shot, but it's just too easy pickings for this loser, and that's Rutgers, who's
kicking them all their down.
I mean,
man.
they lost 34-7 against Maryland.
Yeah.
Their quarterbacks were combined 2 of 17 for 8 total yards.
Wow.
With 5 interceptions.
Yeah.
They almost had more interceptions than total yards.
Ooh.
I don't know how that's possible in the college game today. I don't really honestly know how that's even possible.
I mean,
but they did it.
They're not going to win a game the rest of the year, right?
No.
There's no way, right?
And then my other loser would be Vanderbilt.
Okay, yeah.
They were up 21-3 against Florida.
Yeah.
And not only did they lose, they didn't even cover.
Didn't cover. They pulled the Illinois earlier in the year.
Just like beyond collapse. Like whatever imploded would be the next step there.
Sure.
So that was pretty embarrassing. Derek Mason kind of getting it stuck to him by Dan Mullins.
Yeah,
kind of funny because Derek Mason's kind of a D-bag.
Yeah.
So those would be my losers.
Okay.
Winners, obviously, you can hang LSU up there, Oregon up there, just with stout performances, stands out. As a tremendous winner.
Okay.
Could do Ian Book for his game-winning drive with 5 minutes left against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, as a
the troops.
Yeah, man. I can't.
Yeah, those would be the only winners I had.
All right, so I'll give David from New Orleans. I'll give his real quick. His, I guess we'll start with this loser. He says Auburn. He said playoff aspirations with what they thought was a good quarterback, but the offense just sucks. The downhill running game is not there. He thinks Malzahn, his coaching seat is possibly the hottest right now, especially in the SEC. So I think that's possibly true. Auburn's definitely underachieving. Oh, his face. Yeah, I'll take the touchdown for San Francisco. But yeah, so he said his winner. Another, I guess, like more somewhat abstract one. He said the divisional races. He said all the upsets have created huge log jams in the SEC East, the Pac-12, the Big Ten West, the ACC Coastal. So now a lot of these games that were going to be kind of just like mid-tier, they might be more interesting now moving forward in the month of October. But yeah, so those will be our winners and losers for the week. Let's get into our 1 or 2 bets that we had, whether we had winners and losers. I think the pod overall did okay for the week. Forgot, I didn't really look at individual records. I know Addison did pretty well or whatever, but I'll start with Corey's while Steele's getting his loaded up. I would say Corey's, let's see, his best bet for the week. I'm pretty sure. Did UCLA destroyed in their game, right?
They won by 30.
Okay, so they won by 30 as a 7.5-point dog. I think this was a game that actually I heard and saw some other pros on, perhaps. Corey felt like there's a lot of value in that line. He was correct, so he nailed that. His worst bet, I mean, I guess we can go with Miami, who was my loser for the week. He had them covering 6. Illinois was pretty. Oh yeah, Illinois got trounced by Purdue. Yeah, that's probably possibly the worst one. So,
yeah, my bad ones were my biased pick of Notre Dame minus 21 at home, knowing that it was a trap game. They're on a bye week next week, and they knew that they were the superior team to Pitt. They played horrible. Some terrible. Oh my God, that's a flag.
Good.
So they played horrible. Some untimely flags, turnovers, and they still eked out a win. But that was a pretty bad bet. Just knowing the situation that they were going into. Also, Virginia Tech is just not good at football.
Not good.
So
good,
that was bad. That was a bad one. Navy's a frustrating bet because they got off to like a 17-point
Same.
lead.
Yeah, we were holding a plus 21 ticket or plus 24 ticket,
and decided to just push.
Yeah,
which I guess is not the worst outcome, but Easiest bet on my small slate of games that I played this week was Iowa -4.
Drilled it.
They crushed. Who did they play? Indiana.
Yeah.
It wasn't even very close,
Not close.
from the get go.
Yeah.
So that would be my best bet.
All right, so I'll give Addison's real quick. He actually went 6-1-1. His loss, I would say, is a bad beat. He had under 49 in Wisconsin, Michigan, and that game should have never gone over. So that was his only loss. So I guess that was his worst bet. But his best bet, he had a few good ones. I guess he did get kind of lucky with Florida, so I don't know if that could be thrown in there.
Right.
But I'll say, LSU trounced Georgia. He had LSU plus 7.5, so that has to be his best bet, I would think.
Yeah.
For myself, I had Nebraska +4. I just keep riding the Nebraska train. They just keep giving. Stinky line this week. They are favored against Minnesota, who just actually played Ohio State pretty well in the shoe. But yeah, I like Nebraska Northwestern now. They blew the game straight up, again. Nebraska should have probably 3 wins on the year, and they are 0-6. Scotty Frost, he's got to get some discipline in these boys, and I expect them to be a lot better throughout the end of the year and going into next year. But so that was a pretty good bet. I would say my worst ones were some road Big 12 favorites that Oklahoma State got just whipped by Old Man Bill. I've gone against Old Man Bill a couple times this year now when I'm usually on his side. He's teaching me a lesson again this year, so that was not a good one. But so yeah, those were our bets. Wins and losses, pretty good week overall. But let's get into the meat, I guess, of this pod, the Week 8 preview. We've got 4 games. We're going to go over Michigan at Michigan State. We got NC State at Clemson, Mississippi State at LSU, and then Oregon at Washington State. So first game, let's get into Michigan at Sparty. These are the first kind of few thoughts I have, and then I'll pass it along to you. But the metrics seem to favor Michigan quite a bit. The thing is, D'Antonio's been really good against top 10 teams, especially against Michigan. He's kind of owned them for the most part. I guess my first general thoughts that I'll just give here before I hand it to Steele is that can they generate enough on the ground offensively to balance their attack? They've been really poor at running the ball this year. I don't think they can win the game by having Lewerke just throw it all over the field. I don't think that's going to work against Michigan. On the other side of the ball, can Patterson shoulder the load if Michigan can't get it going themselves on the ground? Because Sparty's actually #1 in the country in stopping the run this year. Now, last week, on Saturday against Penn State actually ran the ball all over them, but it was a lot of those chunk plays, and that's where you can get Michigan State on the ground. Is they're actually they're giving up a lot of huge plays on the ground, but efficiency-wise, they're stuffing your ass. So, what are your thoughts about this game? I think you actually have an official bet on this game already.
Yeah, so I've got Michigan State booked already.
Okay.
In a situational aspect, both teams coming off kind of emotional wins in big marquee matchups from the previous week. Michigan State is at home. It's actually a nooner kick, which is kind of surprising.
It's interesting, yeah.
You mentioned D'Antonio being pretty, productive and successful against top 10 teams.
Yeah.
I look for that to continue. I just see Khakis as not producing or performing in another big spotlight against his rivals.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Michigan State kind of plays in the mindset of almost like a containing defense where they're just going to, be conservative on good special teams, good D.
Right.
Until it's, third or fourth quarter where they've got to take that shot like they had to against Penn State.
Yeah.
And see if they're able to connect on it or not. Obviously, like you said, you're not going to win with Lewerke sitting back there trying to pick apart
a really, times a game,
right, a really good Michigan D. So I look for them to be a little bit more conservative, dink and dunk, tight ends, running backs, and then in the second half, take their shot or two when they get into the plus side of the field or around 50-yard line.
Okay.
And then I think they would be a really good money line bet as well. I think because I just think they're going to compete.
Yeah.
They're going to be in the game late.
Yeah. Yeah, I told some of the guys in like our thread for this pod that I mean this game it's really conflicting for me because if I didn't know anything about the history of this game with like Harbaugh and D'Antonio, I would think Michigan would kill these guys because Michigan State, like I said, they've been really bad running the ball this year. They've actually been not really good defending the pass, but Michigan, they're not exactly world beaters at throwing the ball.
Right.
If they were a lot more efficient throwing, then I think that could be more of a problem. But it's interesting that somehow Michigan State they just produce in games like this, and I can't explain it because the metrics I think always favor the other team by a decent amount. Like this line, it seems like maybe around like 2 points off to me, but if I had to bet, and I don't think I'm going to because I'm so conflicted on it, I think I would have to take Sparty in the points just because that's what D'Antonio does. I mean, I feel like they could win the game somehow, so if I feel that way, then I'm going to take the points. But it'll be interesting. I think, look, if Michigan goes in there and lays it on them, I wouldn't be shocked, but I think that would tell us more like maybe Michigan is possibly like more for real than everyone thought, especially after week one when they lost, right away. So that'll be an interesting game, a good one to start the slate of games on Saturday. But let's get into a game that I'm curious to see just because I don't know anything about one of these teams yet, just because they haven't really played a lot of legit teams in NC State, but they're playing at Clemson this weekend. I believe the line's around 16.5 or 17. Both teams are off a bye week, so that'll be interesting to see. I would say I think this is a playoff elimination game, to be honest, just because let's say like Clemson was to lose, that's the team I think that could afford a loss more, I guess. Their schedule is just so weak this year due to the ACC being down. Like, I really think that neither of these teams can afford a loss, especially NC State.
Right. Totally agree with the playoff elimination. NC State for sure is not making the playoff with one loss.
Yeah.
And Clemson would have a thin margin of error, needing some chaos, just with how weak the ACC has appeared so far to date. I actually have NC State on this play as well. I'm at 17.5.
Yeah.
I think just their style of play can keep it close. I don't think they're going to be a money line play at all. But I don't see them going in there and getting beat by 28 or 30 points.
Sure.
Or getting run out of the building. Just sound fundamentally on defense. I know Corey from Denver is a big Finley fan.
Yeah. Finley's been good.
He's not a turnover machine.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But just with their offensive philosophy, just being pretty conservative, he's a smart quarterback. I don't think that defensive line's going to fluster him. He's not going to just panic and throw it up. I mean, he'll eat the sack, which, from taking the points, is much better than throwing it to Clemson and giving them a short field or something. So, but definitely a playoff elimination game. I expect Clemson to win, but I would hope and think that NC State gets the cover.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add. I did dig into NC State's metrics a little bit. They seem it's kind of funny. They seem like decent at everything, and they're not like really good at anything. They're not horrific at anything. I think the point that you made about Finley is an NFL quarterback, and I think when you have an NFL quarterback, even let's say NC State gets down 24-28, they have the ability to backdoor it with a guy like that being able to throw from behind, get them down the field, get some points.
One thing I am curious to see is to see the development of Lawrence off the bye week.
Oh, for sure.
Just an extra week of mental and physical reps and game planning. I would assume that Clemson has put 2 full weeks of prep time for North Carolina State, considering they are undefeated.
It's their biggest game of the year.
And it's their right. So it's not like they're overlooking them or anything. So to see if there's any additional development or play calling to kind of spotlight Lawrence's talent. We'll see if that's the case.
Well, that's a good point too, because you wonder if I don't think Dabo thinks like this, but with Clemson's schedule being so weak, maybe they feel the pressure to where they feel like they have to cover a game like this and kind of step on the throat mentality if they can.
Right.
And that can a lot of times backfire. But I'm not going to bet the game, I don't think, but I would be with you. I would take NC State. I think they're able to keep it within the number. Before we move on to the next two games, I'm going to give David from New Orleans his thoughts on those first two games just real quick. He leans Michigan. He says, quote, because I think Harbaugh really has them going. I've been impressed with how they control the ball, which they do, but the difference is they have a quarterback now that can actually make plays. Reasonable. He says for the Clemson NC State game, he actually likes Clemson big in this game. He says because NC State is not good enough to take their first real punch of the year. I mean, I think that's reasonable in a sense that NC State really hasn't played a really good team yet. They were supposed to play West Virginia earlier in the year. Now, is West Virginia a really good team? They kind of got sucked in the mouth by Iowa State. A lot of teams seem to get sucked in the mouth by Iowa State randomly in the Big 12. So I'm not real sure about, I don't know if West Virginia's had an off night. We'll get into them more at the end of the year when they're playing some legit teams in the Big 12. But those are his thoughts on those first two games. Let's get into the third game. We have Mississippi State at LSU. This line is, I believe right now it's 6.5. I believe LSU's favored by 6.5. LSU is coming off a really big and emotional win, as we alluded to, against Georgia on Saturday. Mississippi State's actually off a bye week and off a bigger win the week before themselves against, I believe it was Florida. And my first initial thoughts are I think we're actually on opposite sides of this. I guess I'll give why I like Mississippi State in this game. So I like that they are off a bye, and I do like that LSU's coming off like a bigger, like emotional win. Now, maybe it could be one of those things too where, like, I don't think it's always the case that a team coming off a big win just is a letdown. It could give them more confidence perhaps. But the difference with a team like Georgia and Mississippi State is even though Mississippi State has had really bad quarterback play this year, they have been really efficient with the ground game, with stopping the run. They have elite line play. And I think that they're going to match the physicality of LSU, in my opinion. I think that LSU has been really great under Coach O as a dog. So I think when they're a favorite, it's a little different with the target on their back. I'll be curious to see, if LSU can basically, like, I'm not going to say they're going to shut down Mississippi State's run game. I don't think that's quite going to happen. I think if they can contain it enough and force Fitzgerald to have to make plays, then that could end up being quite bad for Mississippi State. But I actually think that Mississippi State has a good chance to win this game on the field. I don't think they're going to, but I think they're going to keep it within the number. So you're on the other side. You can give the LSU perspective now and why you got them.
Yeah, so I think they're riding high off the win, obviously against Georgia.
Yeah.
Night game in Death Valley, always.
Which is, daunting.
Tremendous feat for any visiting team.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mississippi State coming off a bye. Their previous game was against Auburn, who I think everyone,
Auburn, that's right. Yeah.
Everyone I think now agrees was
not
highly overrated.
Yeah.
They lost to Florida, and they also lost to Kentucky. And both of those games, they put up 6 and 7 points.
Yeah.
They beat a terrible.
They should have beat Florida though, but yeah, go ahead.
They beat terrible Louisiana.
Yeah.
They crushed Old Man Bill on the road, and they beat Stephen F. Austin. My point being is, I don't think they have been that impressive in any game.
So you think they're possibly overvalued then?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're able to get it at under a touchdown, I think LSU's defense is good enough to keep Mississippi State at maximum 17 points.
Okay.
And so that tells you have to get 24-ish.
Yeah.
From from LSU, and that's on the very high end.
Sure.
So just what I've seen from Joe Burrow and LSU's defense, I just think it's a solid number to play LSU at home. With running a lot of momentum off the win from Georgia. But I obviously see the converse spot in terms of, situationally, how do they react? I would much look at the game much differently if the game was at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I think they can continue that kind of vibe and riding off the high momentum
Sure.
while it being a night home game.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if LSU like laid it to them. I think we are getting to the point where we think LSU is a team that like we're kind of looking at Alabama's schedule and we're trying to find a team that maybe can give them a headache, and I think that could be one. But and that game is in Baton Rouge and it'll be at night. But I think also when I kind of dug into LSU this year and tried to zoom out a little bit, and I felt like they haven't actually been that great of a team. They haven't been that efficient. I think Georgia was just a really good matchup for them just because Georgia couldn't match the physicality. Now, to your point, I think where I could get in trouble is Nick Fitzgerald. He just has been poor. He's been bad. And if he turns the ball over, if they can't have some kind of balance, then this game could get out of hand. But I think they're going to do just enough. I think I am going to ride the LSU coming off an emotional win. Mississippi State had an extra, week off to prepare. I think it'll be within the number, but I expect LSU to get the win. But so, you guys we're usually, I think the pod is, we don't always agree, but I feel like we view games like, I would say probably this, like, we're probably on the same page more often than not. But when we are on other sides, I could see, I'm not trying to be nice because we're on camera or something. I can see both sides being argued. So that's going to be an interesting game. That game really intrigues me to see. If LSU beats down Mississippi State, owns them on the line of scrimmage, I think we can sit there and say they could give Alabama some problems. Possess the ball, be the more physical team. That's very possible. We'll talk about that down the road though and see. So the last game. Oregon at Washington State. First time ever in the history of college game day that they're going to be in Pullman, Washington. So that's pretty cool for them.
Rowdy.
Flying that crimson flag at every single location or whatever. The line has kind of been funny because it opened Washington State -2, I believe. It moved to where Oregon all of a sudden became a 1 or 2 point favorite, and now it's back, I believe, currently. I mean, this was as of 2 hours ago. Washington State being favored by 1.5. So, a couple quick general thoughts. Washington State is off a bye. Oregon did come off just a pretty damn big win against Washington. My kind of own personal thoughts when I dug into this. So, Oregon has been pretty poor versus the past this year. We alluded to that. Washington Browning having some success against them. In Washington State, they've been actually pretty decent against the pass themselves. So I feel like there might be an advantage for them on both sides there. Pullman has recently been a pretty nightmarish venue for Oregon from what I read as far as the trends. Oregon has not played very well when they go there. I actually do have Washington State minus. I got them at -1 apparently before it moved to 1.5, but I did get Washington State at -1 earlier today. I think that they're going to win this game, obviously. I think Oregon, I think when Addison and I have talked about Oregon the last few weeks, I felt a little bit higher on them after they played Stanford. Even though they lost, they gifted that game away. We've talked about that on this pod twice already. And I felt like the win against Washington was a little deceiving. I've made a point to that I think Washington actually outplayed them. So, in Washington State quietly this year, we said in the Pac-12 preview, we're well, they lost a lot. We had one guy here, the fan of the Pirate, saying you can't underestimate the Pirate. He's a genius, and I really like their quarterback. I feel embarrassed that I can't remember his name, but I've seen him play twice this year, and I like how they play, and I think this is a bad spot for Oregon. I really like the Cougs here. Your thoughts? Which way you lean? Are you gonna bet the game?
Yeah. So looky, Mr. Pirate. 6-0 against the spread.
Yeah, man.
And coming off a bye, and essentially another playoff elimination game, as we've said, quite a few times in this pod, as we'll continue to say, going throughout the year.
And this is for that conference. They're already on the outside looking in, but I think if you're saying if Oregon loses this game, it's over probably.
Right, pretty much. if Washington State has any hope, obviously they need to continue to win and have some help
Chaos,
as well.
yeah.
But yeah, as you alluded to in our Pac-12 preseason preview, a lot of people were down on the Pirate.
They were.
And I said, not so fast, my friend. He is an offensive genius, and he's getting that defense to play pretty well, even though his defensive coordinator was kind of picked out from last year.
Right.
But the two things that I just said, 6-0 against the spread this year and being off a bye at home would be my lean towards Washington State.
Okay.
The total isn't out yet, or at least not available on the places
I didn't
we
see
wager.
It. Right.
So I don't know what the total is there, but I would definitely lean the over in this game just based off of offensive production from both sides. You're looking at, a 30-40 type of game for both teams totals. So I wouldn't be shocked if the total's 75. If it's anything under that, I would say you're going to get some value and take the over on it, unless it's like a weird number, like 59 or something.
I could see it being weird. Like I was thinking, like 58 or 59.
Yeah,
something weird that. Yeah,
but
Pullman's it's a weird place to play.
It's a weird venue.
Yeah.
But I think the offenses show out, and I think the over or Washington State or possibly both would be the side that I would take. But Pirate looking for.
I like them.
Climb the standings.
It's a very confident bet for me this weekend, so we'll see. I don't think Tolman had any thoughts about that game. Apparently, he doesn't care about the Pac-12, but he did give. I'll give a quick thought from him for the Mississippi State game. He said he's leaning Mississippi State. He actually gave a similar reason for mine. He says he thinks they'll match LSU's physicality, but he feels like this is going to be the spot that LSU has, like the letdown. And maybe you count the Florida game, but I think that was a tough spot for them too. But he says he would actually just lean the under, whatever that is in that game. And I mean, that's probably reasonable. We've got good defenses in that game. Mississippi State's been struggling to score points, as Steele alluded to. But so those will be that'll be the Week 8 previews. The last thing I think we were going to get into, I was. At the end, we always talk about some bets if we have them. We already gave a lot of those. So I think briefly, because I think we are technically halfway through the year. And we debated on this pod doing like a halfway, like revised playoff predictions. But I don't think I'm going to ask you to do that necessarily. But do you have any thoughts about these teams that are in like the top 5 right now? Do you feel less about certain teams? Like, I think we both can agree that I would be shocked right now if you told me you don't think Bama is overwhelmingly the best team. Like, they're definitely the best team, I think, right now by a large margin.
Yeah, just going off of the top 10 AP, I don't think there's a surprise team in there.
Yeah,
based off of preseason predictions and previews and performances. I think the most surprising team would be UCF, even though they haven't really played anybody.
Yeah, LSU's been, I think, pretty surprising for the most part.
Yeah, being an underdog 3 times and winning straight out in all 3 games is pretty impressive and pretty surprising as well, just from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Bama looks to be the lead dog as long as Tua stays healthy. There were some injury concerns last week.
He's been, I think he sprained his knee 2 weekends ago.
I think OSU's looked the least impressive out of the top 10-ish teams.
Right.
In terms of teams that just keep winning, but yet, aren't pounding teams into the ground, so to speak. Their run game seems to be off. Their pass D seems to be off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
That's about it, really.
Yeah, I think I would say right now, I think Bama is definitely still making the playoff, and I think they're definitely 10 points better than any team they play. Now, that doesn't mean they can't lose. It's a playoff now, so they have to win 2 games to win the championship, and that's not easy to do. It's tough. If they end up playing, Clemson, Notre Dame, or Ohio State, whoever, there's a lot of teams up there that can play with them still, but they are. I think it's one of those things where if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, and they bring what's even close to their A game, they're the best team. I think looking forward to the second half of the year, as Steele alluded to with Clemson, I want to see, if Lawrence improves greatly, moving towards the back end of this year, that's a team to watch out for because I do think the defense is there to give some of these other top teams a problem. Ohio State, I'm probably the most down on Ohio State fan in the city of Columbus. I think that Steele nailed it pretty perfectly. The run game has not been that efficient. The offensive line is not winning the point of attack. The defense has been, it's actually been decently efficient, but they are giving up big play after big play. Like they're ranked like 120th in explosive D. It's in the run game. It's in the pass game. They are going to be in big trouble against any kind of team. Like even this upcoming week, we didn't preview this game because Purdue's not ranked. But, Purdue's plus 14, that's actually the ABC primetime game. And I think it'd be nuts to not take Purdue. I mean, what Purdue does well is what Ohio State doesn't do well. I think Purdue's going to make some explosive plays and keep that within the number. And it possibly could be a scare spot. Now, I don't think Purdue's going to stop Ohio State. I think Dwayne Haskins is a special player, and that's the reason that Ohio State is still, winning a lot of these games. But Ohio State, they look like Georgia to me from this year. And the blueprint, I think, was laid out by LSU, and that's what, as an OSU fan, concerns me about Michigan. And that's why I said there's a couple one-loss teams that I think are definitely sitting right there in prime position. I think Michigan and I think Oklahoma are both legit teams that could run the table and get into the playoff. I know Texas, if any of you guys are Texas fans, I know you're going to be pissed when I say this, but I think Oklahoma's the better team. I think you deserve to win the game. You won. But Oklahoma had like almost 3 yards more per play. I think Oklahoma's the better team. I think Kyler Murray is a dynamic player. Could they end up with a second loss and the Big 12 champ has 2 losses and doesn't get in? Absolutely. Oklahoma's defense is not that good. Texas proved you can run on them, so I think that's certainly a concern for them. But I like the makeup of Michigan's team. I think they are the best team in the Big Ten right now. Now, that game is in Columbus. I hope I'm wrong. I think, and here's the thing, too. We are only halfway through the year. A lot of these teams, there's a lot of areas that they can improve upon. I think, as far as, like, schedule-wise, Notre Dame and Clemson, I would say, have the easiest roads. Like, I think it's not that those teams on, like, for example, your boys, we've said this, there's games on the schedule that they certainly could lose. They're not cupcake games, but you're going to be a favorite the whole way out. It's the same thing with Clemson. So it'll be interesting moving forward. I think when a lot of these scenarios, like I see on Twitter or I see on the college football shows on TV, they talk about these, what happens if all these teams go 12-0, then who would deserve to get in? Well, that's not going to happen. That was already proven last week. Georgia loses. We've got Ohio State dicking around with Minnesota, Notre Dame dicking around with Pitt. There's going to be more unexpected losses, as there always is every year in college football. I don't think there's going to be more than 1 to maybe 2 12-0 teams. I think Alabama's going undefeated. After that, I think all bets are off. I really don't know. So, any closing thoughts or?
Nope.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Irish on the bye week. That's everybody else can go lose.
Notre Dame on the bye. Ohio State with a nuts. It's going to be tricky. Purdue's going to cause some issues. I don't think Purdue's defense can hang in there quite long enough. That might be a game to look at the over. Actually, I could see that game having a lot of points. So, until I guess the next week. Check. Check as always if this is your first time watching the pod. Check later in the week for our bets that I'll put up in the description. That'll usually be like somewhere between Wednesday and Friday. I add them in there. But, so yeah.
That's Jesus. Bye.
Bye.